Hi, thanks for checking out our repair channel. This is just going to be a testing video showing a Gallagher MR5000. This particular one is a 220 version. It's an older model, older variation that they originally brought over here and sold in the States. Eventually, they went to a 110 version, probably back in 2009, 10, 11, somewhere in that range. There for a little while, they only sold the 220 version of this big unit. Then they eventually, like I said, went to a 110 version. But this particular unit is a 220 volt. It takes this weird, like European, not even European, like Australian style plug on it. It's kind of an oddball. What most people would do when they would buy these is they would cut this off, because there's not very many adapters I know of that for these things. So what most people would do, since 220 volt, not a whole lot of draw on it, so you don't need a real big, heavy duty, high amp deal, power plug for it. But some people would do, they would cut this off and either hardwire it into an outlet for 220 volt, or to electrical box, or they would cut it off and wire on a an American version of a 220 plug. There's multiple variations of them out there. What I would see some people do would get a regular 110 plug, but they make another variation of that where instead of having two prongs that are side by side, they had one. There's another variation that has one prong that's vertical like normal, and the other one next to it is sideways. And if you look at some 110 outlets, they will have a T-shaped. One of the prongs could be T-shaped, so that's what those are used for. And they just have to make sure, if you want 220 volt power, you got to wire that outlet up for 220 volts. I've seen those type of plugs as well. But this is a 50 store Joule unit. They make a couple bigger ones now. This was the biggest one that Gallagher carried here in the States for quite some time, up until about 2014 or so. They came out, or maybe 15 or 16. They came out with a 58 Joule called the M5800i 110 version over here. And they also make a 100 Joule unit, which is the biggest in the world now. It's a 100 stored Joule unit called the M10000i. It's those two big Gallagher units. I've seen one or two of them at a couple farm shows, and the aesthetics and the way that those things work is phenomenal. So, but this for its time here in the States was the biggest one that Gallagher made and sold here. But it's a good unit. We've worked on a few 220 volt and a few 110 volt units, but we'll go ahead and power it up here, and we'll show you, show you it working. It has two lights on it that flash. The top one will settle down here in a minute and go steady. There it is. The top light is full power. Should be a green light. You can switch this to a half power mode. It actually has three modes to it. It has solid green, which is your normal mode, I guess. There's a set of dip switches on the back of the unit. The top here, inside there, that are, it's hard to see. There we go. Set of switches up inside there. Those are corresponding for some different settings for this unit. There's a normal mode, half power, turbo mode, some other stuff. But to physically turn this into half power, which will make that top light turn yellow, there's a couple switches that you have to switch to turn it into half power. Most people have never used it. They wanted as much power to the fence as they can get. Now this unit will kick itself into turbo mode on its own. This is kind of an adaptive unit. It kind of adapts its output accordingly to the fence conditions. And when the top light flashes as well, that means it's in turbo mode. And that means you got a pretty heavy load out there on the fence that's causing it to make that top light flash. And so the only way to get it out of turbo mode and to back to normal, I guess, would be, or the high power mode, I guess, would be to fix your fence, straighten it out, clean up the fence and everything, and then plug it back in. And it will stay in turbo mode for, I don't know, 6 or 8 pulses to kind of monitor itself, monitor the fence for a moment. Once it realizes, okay, not so stressed out anymore, then it will go back to showing a steady green light on top. And the bottom light is just your fence okay light, I guess, or whatever. It will always flash green with every pulse. If it doesn't, then you've got trouble somewhere, either on the fence possibly, or an issue with the unit. Now, if you're not sure if the unit itself is working right or not, you don't know if it's a fence problem or an energizer problem, just the easiest way to do this with any brand is to unplug, unhook the battery, however it's powered up, turn it off somehow, unhook your fence and ground from it, and then turn it back on. And then give it a few pulses to see if it's straightened itself out. If it does, or it's acting normal, test your output with if you got a electric fence meter. You need to get probably 6,000 plus volts out of a unit. This one probably puts out 7,000 to 8,000. So we'll just go across this unit here and we'll see what it puts out. And we are getting a little over 9,000 volts out of it. Got a bad light glare thing here going on. They're not very bright when I had the lights off. And we're getting a little over 9,000, like 9,500 volts out of it. So 9,500 volts out of a 50 storage joule unit. Probably outputs about 35, give or take. What's nice about these big Gallagher units, and even the new Gallagher, the big ones that are adaptive, the I series and such, the two big units that Gallagher makes now, the 5800i and the M10000i, both of those I believe have a two-stage system, and it has a bank of capacitors. And the same thing goes on with this one. This has two big transformers in it and two banks of capacitors. Typically it's like two channels, so typically it will run off of one channel, so one transformer and one capacitor, and it will just dump all that power out to the fence. As soon as it picks up a situation where the fence is loaded down pretty hard and it feels a little more stress, it will start triggering in and bringing in a second channel, so bringing two transformers and a second bank of capacitors, and it's really going to hit the fence hard to try to compensate for whatever's stressing it out on the fence. But as soon as you fix the issues and plug it back in, give it a few pulses, and then that top light should go back to solid green and not flashing green. I mean, if it's flashing green, that just tells you that, hey, you got a pretty good stress out there that's really hitting the fence hard, because there's something going on out there. But it doesn't mean you got to run out there and fix the fence right away. It's going to power it pretty good, but the only downside of that is it's going to start stressing the transformers out. They start getting pretty hot because they're running real hard and there's a lot of power dumping through them. So you can stress the transformer out prematurely and break them down over time. Because I've opened up these big units, they've got two transformers. You can always tell which one's being, the main channel versus the secondary channel. The first channel transformer be really discolored and stressed out looking. It's probably still fine internally when you test them. And the second transformer will be fairly clean looking, fairly nice looking. It won't be all stressed looking and discolored. There might be a little bit, but not like the primary one does. So that's a little tidbit on this deal. Hopefully, if you've got one of these units, the MR5000, they also make a smaller variation that was 110 volts MR2500, which they don't make that model anymore either, but they were both good units. So we'll go and do a spark test on this deal here. Plug it back in, and we'll find something to jump across it here. So I'm gonna just touch the ground and get real close to the hot side, and we'll see this spark that this thing jumps. It's not a very big spark, like the spark's not really far apart, but the brightness of it is what tells you how strong it is. Actually turned part of my screwdriver black right there, and on the tip right there when it's still on that spark. There's a lot of current coming out of these big Gallagher units. Well, both big units that throw a pretty good spark, that are pretty high joule units. They're all pretty you know, strong units will throw a pretty good spark, and sometimes you'll get them to you know, arc your screwdriver or whatever you're jumping a spark with. But hopefully that helps you out. You know, we'd be happy to work on one for you. I mean, we give you free quotes. We don't charge you a penny for testing anything. Anything that comes in for repair, it gets a free quote on it. If we can't fix it for some dumb reason, you know, we don't charge you for looking at it unless you want it sent back unrepaired. And typically we just charge you the freight to get it back. There's no service fees, no labor charges, nothing like that. And if we do fix something, we give you a 1.5 year repair warranty on everything that we fix, and that covers the parts and labor and everything that we and shipping going back to you on units that we fix on the parts that we have repaired or replaced in the thing. But not a whole lot ever goes wrong with these. It's usually the board has issues from age or lightning, most likely, or the transformers get stressed out and they go bad. But that takes time. It doesn't go bad right away. These things are not sealed, so most plug-in units are probably recommended to be installed indoors out of the weather. If you got to have them outside, build a box for them and protect them, because these things, especially this big one, they don't have any gasket in them. They're just an overlapping front and back case with no gasket. They don't even overlap that much. They only overlap like, you know, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch, so they're not overlapping very much. So I have seen units that are all full of rust and crap at the bottom of the unit because water comes in from the top of the sides and runs down and sits there. But as it's plugged in, all that water runs across this electronics on the board, and stuff, it just shorts things out and ruins it. And then you'll see a bunch of dirt and grime and crap at the bottom of the case. So you got to protect your units if you're putting them installing them outside. But it's better to keep them installed indoors and just run your wires outside to it. But anyways, until we do another video of how to fix something, how to test something, or how one works or whatever, we will see you guys later. And eventually, you know, remember to go to our website, which is fencerfixer.com. That's Fencer and Fixer, both spelled with an F as in Frank. And we work on all brands of all ages of these electric fence boxes. I don't care how old it is, what brand it is, when it was built, what's wrong with it. You know, we'll take a look at anything. You know, if we can't fix it for some reason, like I said, not any charge from us, just your freight to get it here, and then we can proceed from there. But we will see you guys later until we do another video of how to fix something.